Hey everyone, Gaijin Goomba here. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite things in the whole world, mechs. I mean it, ever since I discovered MechWarrior 3 as a teenager, I have been in love with the concept of huge humanoid battle machines. Oh, don't get me wrong, I love me some tanks, and I've had the great fortune to compare and contrast real-life tanks versus video game tanks. But in my heart of hearts, nothing can compare to games like MechWarrior, Hawken, and Dark Horizons Mechanized Corps. 28-ton, ponderous, stomping titans of steel and war, 1, 2, even 3 stories tall, autocannons that fire shells as big as a car, missile racks that could darken the sky with rains of hellfire, lasers of green, blue, and red slicing through metal like a sword through flesh. With every step you took, you shook the very earth around you. One man, one machine, lots of guns. Sorry about that, I get a little excited. But that's not all completely what defines a mech, is it? Mechs can be something far, far different. Fast, elegant, humanoid in their design and movement, capable of refined melee combat and lightning speed, personally wielding any number of weapons from rifles to swords. In a very real way, a mech can resonate within it the very soul of its pilot. So the question I have for you, my friends, is how can we have two things that are so juxtaposed to each other be classified under the same genre of gaming? Seriously, on one hand, you essentially have gargantuan slow-moving tanks with feet, and on the other, you have humanoid machines that move as fast as sound, and move so precise it would make the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps hang their heads in shame. Well, like most things I talk about on this channel, it's the culture of our nations, particularly the war culture, that has shifted and changed the concept of what a mech truly is. But to understand why this phenomenon exists, let's go back in time and look at just how mech games developed between the US and Japan. Based on the popular 1984 tabletop turn-based combat game known as BattleTech, America got its first taste of true mech gaming combat in 1989 with the release of MechWarrior, a first-person shooting game that defied the genre by giving the player a multitude of things to manage. Heat levels, ammo counts on multiple weapons at once, armor statistics management on every part of the body, the HUD view, radar-based map. Although it seems primitive today, for an 80s DOS game, this was incredibly complicated, and it only got bigger. As the PC gaming franchise evolved into bigger and better graphics, so too did the amount of management required to pilot a mech. New mechs, new weapons, multiple armor types, new ways to manage heat sinks. With every new MechWarrior game came more and more ways you were in control of your hulking war machine. Today, while MechWarrior remains one of the most identifiable mech games of all time, others have made their way into the world of gaming, like Hawken, which gives a greater sense of speed and movement to mech combat, or like Dark Horizons, which streamlines some of the complexities of MechWarrior for a newer, broader audience. But no matter how diverse Western mechs became, the core idea was ever present. You were one pilot managing and controlling a massive war machine, customizing each mech you collected with a varying amount of weapons, armor, and chassis. Your mech was the critical tool that became the make or break of the battlefield. But what about the other side of the world? Japan had a long history when it comes to mech games. From the mid-90s on, you had games like Front Mission, Xenogears, and how could I ever forget Super Robot Wars? But those were turn-based RPGs, much like the original tabletop MechWarrior, and comparing those games to Western PC mech games is like comparing chess to COD. Regardless, Japan started to experiment with action-based mech games of their own, with titles like the completely awesome Armored Core series, which has the most customization and interaction of any Japan-based mech game I've ever seen. Mwah, delectable. There's older mech games like Frame Gride, and to be completely fair, Front Mission evolved into being an action-based mech game rather than a turn-based one. And as of today, you have a few unique Japanese mech games like Striker Suit Zero, but due to the immense popularity of the anime Giga Giant, Gundam mech games like the Gundam vs. Gundam series, the frustrating Another Century episode series, the new and amazing Gundam Breaker series, and really there's just way too many Gundam games to count. But they are all, in fact, categorized as mech action games. Here's the catch though. You notice something different between this and this? The mechs of Western action games are ponderous and relatively slow moving. They're basically a pair of legs with armaments of a naval destroyer strapped to them. Oh sure, a few of them have jump jets, but even those make the mech hover clumsily through the air like a cow with a jetpack. For lack of a better way to put it, they're simply huge, somewhat interchangeable machines whose likeness to humans are limited to simply their feet. The mech games of Eastern action games, though, completely different. Even in the earliest of the JRPGs, they've been fast, maneuverable, and most distinctly of all, human-looking. The proportions are all there. Head, torso, arms, legs, all to scale as a human. Instead of strapping autocannons, missile racks, and Gauss rifles to their arms and torsos, they instead use typical military ordnance but appropriate size, mirroring what we use as humans. Rifles, missile launchers, heavy machine guns, even swords, shields, pikes, and a flail for crying out loud. Even though those mechs have had guns strapped to their backs, shoulders, and arms, they are still far more human-looking and moving than Western mechs ever have. Cripes, even our television media mechs are all entirely different. From Robot Jox to Pacific Rim, even our most human-looking mechs are slow, clumsy, and jam-packed with internal weaponry. As for Japan, Eva, Gundam, Macross, all of them human-looking. Quick and nimble, basically functioning as if they were nothing more than a bigger version of the pilot within them. But why? Why do we have this weird dichotomy? Honestly, it has everything to do with our separate evolutions of war culture, and in what aspects of that culture we place importance. As stated in an earlier video talking about why Americans love shooter games, in our young life as a country, our war theology has always revolved around two things: the common soldier and the tool that he uses to get the job done. There's nothing elegant, pretty, or honestly even incredibly honorable that drives that culture of war. It's simply men and women strong enough to get the job done with the right tools at their disposal, and those tools being weaponry for whatever the situation calls for. So too is this reflected in the mechs of the West. When you play games like MechWarrior Old and New, what you pilot is completely dependent on the job you undertake as a soldier. Do you take a light mech to scout and reconnaissance? Do you take a medium mech to act as a mobile backup for smaller or larger units? Or do you roll heavy or assault and act as a damage sponge or bipedal ordnance factory? And yes, even I would get invested in the bots that I built in the mech lab, but you would never have just one. You would build a multitude of them, optimize them, and use them in battle when the mission called for it. As for the East, Japan specifically, much of their war culture stems from oneness of themselves and their weapons. A samurai's katana could have a lineage of 100 years being in the hands of a warrior's ancestor. Really intensive and personal care went not only into the training of the weapon, but also its maintenance. The creation of these weapons was more than just creating tools of war. It was a creation of something spiritual, something pure. While a samurai or bushi had a responsibility to serve their lords and masters, there was a unique connection between their weapons and themselves. So too is this reflected in the mech games of Japan. Eastern mechs are more than just stomping cannons. Their movement, fighting capacity, and even their appearance are modeled after their pilot, and their pilot will have a unique relationship with their mech. Whether it's a Gundam, a Gear, or even a Skell, mechs of the East are unique to their pilot, and that's why the definition of a mech and mech games is so different. You know what's crazy though? I've been sitting here for a while talking about how mechs in video games are reflections of culture, but what I bet you didn't know is that this concept has officially bled into real life. No joke, there is a rivalry going on right now. The US-based Megabots team with their mech, simply known as Megabot Mark II, has called out for a fight with the Japanese team at Suidobashi and their mech called Kuratas, and Suidobashi accepted. The Megabots team opened a Kickstarter and merchandising to get the funding they needed to have the best in American robotics, with some pretty substantial success, where the Suidobashi heavy industry team have made do with the resources they have. Come June of 2016, we're gonna see these two titans go at it head to head. But have you guys noticed something? The Megabot Mark II is exactly like something we would see out of MechWarrior. Though lacking in legs, it's massive, heavily armed, likely slow moving, and overall makes itself out to be a titan more than anything. But the Kuratas? Where the Megabot Mark II is 15 feet tall and 6 US tons, the Kuratas is 13 feet tall and 4 US tons. That's a substantial size difference. While again lacking in walking feet, the Kuratas looks far more human with a distinct head, torso, cockpit, shoulders, and claw-grasping arms. And this sucker is fast and flexible, capable of speed and control rivaling that of a domestic vehicle. Sure seems like it could outpace the Megabot. Man, doesn't that all sound familiar? There's just no denying the cultural inspiration behind the machine. From video games to real life, the future of mechanized combat is still influenced by the oldest of military culture. But speaking of the great robot battle between Megabot Mark II and the Kuratas, who do you think is gonna win? Will the heavily armed Megabot come out on top, or will the cunning Kuratas rule the day? Cast your vote and I'll let you know next episode. Last time though, I asked you if the terrifying Krampus was really a bad guy or just a regular Joe trying to do his job. Out of 3,780 of you, 2,778 said that they were A-okay with the Horned Devil of Christmas. And I'm sure the guy thanks you for that. I'm not sure though if that'll get you out of a whipping come next Christmas, so you better be good. If you want to have a look at those tank and shooter game videos I mentioned earlier, click here or the links in the description to check those out. But until next time everyone, this is Gaijin Goomba signing out.